enabled. Great. So welcome everyone to the Green Homes webinar. Really excited to have everyone joining us this morning. I know it's a bit early start, so I really appreciate everyone joining in and being part of the conversation. Hopefully this is going to be really informative, and yeah, loads of great conversations happening from this as well. So if I just get my presentation. Yep. Ciara, just give me a shout if you can see this.
Yeah, can see that. It's not quite full screen yet, but.
Oh, great. Okay. I've just gone on to the next slide, so hopefully that's working. So about this webinar, so this event is for builders, electricians, plumbers, and other trades interested in learning new skills, winning more businesses, and being part of the solution to the climate emergency. Retrofit is key to achieving the government and council's net zero targets. Retrofitting is the process of adding new technology or features to homes in order to make them more energy efficient. It's also a major growth area. It's predicted that will be 27,400 new green jobs to upgrade Waltham Forest's housing stock in the next 25 years. There are currently 8 million lofts that need insulating in the UK, 5 million uninsulated cavity walls, and 20 million uninsulated floors that need upgrading if we were to reach these targets. This represents a significant area of work for local builders insulating, installing insulation, double glazing, and new heating technologies. Ciara has told me that my slides haven't changed, so I'm just going to keep it like this. So just to introduce myself, my name's Ajay Pabial, my pronouns are he and him. I'm the Growth Sector Project Manager here at Waltham Forest. And all my role here is supporting businesses in the borough to decarbonise and become more sustainable, but also identifying any skills gaps that we can support residents into greener jobs. This morning, as you've already met, we've got an amazing panel of guests joining us, sharing their experiences, lessons, and just sharing their wisdom generally. So it's a really open conversation. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. There will be time for a Q&A later as well, so we can have a more of a conversation there. So yes, we have Brian Berry, Chief Executive of Federation of Master Builders, Chloe, CEO of Grounded, Beth, Architect, Housing and Retrofit Specialist, Ciara Hanson, Climate and Program Manager from London Borough, Waltham Forest, and then later we'll be joined by Anthony, who's Customer Engagement Manager at the London branch and at CITB. So to kick things off, I'm going to invite Brian to share a presentation for the next 10 minutes. So I'll be sharing Brian's slides for him. So I'm just going to stop sharing and then hand over to Brian.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll just wait for my slide, the first slide to pop up, if that's okay. If you've got it to hand. I'm glad you've got this pressure, Angie, rather than me. We did try to do this before and it failed, so Angie very kindly agreed.
Sorry, I'm now having technical difficulties. I'm just going to get it up. There we are.
The magic moment, isn't it? Just waiting for it to...
Ta-da! Over to you, Brian.
Well, as I can't see it at the moment.
Oh, that's strange. Sorry.
I mean, I can start if that's helpful, but I can't see. I don't think anyone else can see it. Here we are. That's good. So we go on to slide 2, Federation of Master Builders.
Doesn't change sides.
Oh, there we are. Okay, let's take it from there. So I think in my introduction, I explained about the Federation of Master Builders. We've got quite a long history going back to the Second World War, which is a strange time to set up a trade body, actually. But it was during the time of the London Blitz, and the small builders in London were unable to secure the contracts to do the bomb damage from the council. So they banded together to create the Federation of Master Builders. And from those humble origins in 1941, we've grown to be the largest trade association in the construction sector, nearly 7,000 SME and micro building companies all across the UK. So it's quite good to have that wider perspective about what's happening. As I mentioned, the majority of my members work in the repair, maintenance and improvement sector, hence their interest in retrofit, but about 10% build new homes as well. And I think the critical thing about what we're trying to do at the Federation, despite having quite a long history, it's only over the last 10 years that we've been changing the entry criteria. So we're moving away from being a traditional trade association where you pay your money and you get the badge, to one where we actually vet the members coming in. So we reject up to about 20% of applications coming into the FMB. We require all our members to have an independent inspection. And we've got a 14-point entry check just to make sure these companies are bona fide, because the problem at the moment is that anyone can call themselves a builder. And we've got quite a proud record of training apprentices for our industry. So we go on to the next slide. So when we're thinking about retrofit, it's a huge challenge, but I think also a massive opportunity. We're very fortunate in this country to have a very rich and varied housing stock. We've got about 29 million homes. The downside is that we've got the oldest and leakiest housing stock in Europe. With 39% of our stock was built before 1939. And the consequences of our leaky housing stock is that we've got over 2.5 million households living in fuel poverty. And that's linked to about 10,000 deaths as a result of people living in cold homes. And the situation probably has got worse because of the rise in energy costs. But the critical thing, I think, is the last bit. 85% of our homes will still be with us in 2050. So if we are going to deliver zero carbon by 2050, we've actually got to tackle our existing housing stock. And that, I would argue, is a major infrastructure project in terms of turning this around. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So the question is, given that we've got the scale of this challenge and we need to upgrade our existing housing stock, what is holding us back? Well, from the industry's point of view, it is unfortunate that as a sector, we are very fragmented. It doesn't really unify very nicely. So we've got major house builders, we've got the tier 1, tier 2 contractors, but the vast majority are SME and micro companies, about 98%. And that's very fragmented. In terms of retrofit, it's also very unclear about the standards to use. For social housing, we know the government has asked for PAS 2035, but in the private sector, Trustmark are using License Plus as a standard. And I know that some of my members are learning as they go with some particular clients. So the absence of an agreed standard across the private and public sectors needs to be addressed. We need to actually think about driving up training because that's very ad hoc in the construction industry. And most of those training courses don't really focus on low carbon. So we do need to think about new qualification requirements. And you can see there at the bottom figure, 89% of contractors don't hold formal qualifications for pre-1919 work. So this absence of skills is going to be a major problem in terms of improving our housing stock. And if we go on to the next slide, we can look at the challenges from the consumer's point of view. So for consumers, it is often very confusing, the lack of information about who to go to and who to trust. The government has put quite a strong push on decarbonising heating, but I would argue that should be really aligned with thinking about fabric improvements as well, because installing heat pumps won't be suitable for all properties. Again, as in the industry, consumers face the challenge of the standards and quality. Because anyone can call themselves a builder in our sector, there are unfortunately cowboy builders who will exploit the retrofit market. We know that there are very few financial incentives for owner-occupiers. The only incentive available is to remove your gas boiler. There's nothing there improving the fabric of your home. And because I think of the cost of living crisis, only 10% of households are undertaking standalone energy efficiency works, primarily because of the cost and perceived value. So we go on to the next slide. Thank you. Thank you. So we do need some form of intervention. These results are from a survey we recently carried out of our members. And you can see there that 26% of our members cited a lack of a clear pipeline of work. They referred to the lack of available finance for consumers and poor consumer awareness. And of course, as I mentioned, there's a lack of capacity and skills in the workforce at 16%. So this is not a very encouraging picture if we're trying to actually upskill and create demand in the retrofit market. Go on to the next slide, please. So the industry has come together under the Construction Leadership Council to support a long-term plan to retrofit. And it was a couple of years ago during the pandemic that the CLC supported the creation of a national retrofit strategy. So a long-term plan, a 20-year plan to actually transform our existing homes. And I think the critical thing about the strategy is what it was saying. You can't look at things in isolation. So you can't look at the finance and grants for consumers without looking at training and accreditation for builders. At the same time, you should be looking at the supply chain, making sure there's sufficient materials and equipment. And also you need to think about the compliance and quality regime. So there are 8 interlocking components there, which all need to be working in parallel. And I think, unfortunately, with government policy, it has been very much a sort of looking at bits of those strands. And we've had very much a stop-go approach. We had the Green Deal, we've had the Green Homes Grant Scheme, which came in and then was taken away. So this flip-flopping of government policy, I don't think has been helpful, which is why the industry has supported the long-term approach, which is advocated here in the strategy. So we're going to the next slide. The F&B, for its part, we've been calling for changes. We've been calling for an update in building regulations to mandate more energy efficient properties. We've been calling for a licensing of building companies because at the moment anyone can call themselves a builder. We've argued for energy to be part of construction training, so we need to actually review all the training courses, and for the trades not to see themselves working in silos, but to actually be part of a team, because obviously the energy efficiency of a building very much depends on all the trades working together. And we did call for the creation of a task force. In the absence of the government taking a lead, a few years ago, we said actually there does need to be a national retrofit task force. And I'm really pleased to say that actually that was set up. So if we just move on to the next slide. So just under 2 years ago, the National Retrofit Hub was set up. It's industry-led. It is, I would argue, filling a role which would be better done by government, but it's something that the industry has been leading. It's about sharing best practice. There are 6 working groups looking at all key parts of the National Retrofit Strategy. So the work to date has been very encouraging, and I'm hoping, obviously, with the new government coming in, whoever that is, that actually the government will in time work with the National Retrofit Hub to deliver the policy changes that I think are needed. And if we go on to the next slide, please. And I just want to sort of finish off really more about the licensing side, because actually there is a poor skill set in the building industry in terms of upskilling for retrofit. We have been calling for the licensing of building companies, and we've been working with Mark Garnier, who is a Conservative MP, to call for the licensing. The government has pulled away from that. So in the lead up to the general election, we've been doing some active work trying to get this policy put into the parties' manifestos. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, going forward, I think in terms of the industry, we'll be supporting the work of the National Retrofit Hub. We'll be feeding into the main political parties, and we'll be calling for that long-term plan for domestic retrofit if we're going to succeed in transforming our 29 million homes. Thank you very much.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Brian, for sharing your presentation. Some really informative information there. Going to move on to our next speakers, to Chloe and Beth.
Hello. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Hi, we've kind of already done a bit of an intro, but just to recap, I'm Chloe Phelps. I head up Grounded, which is an architecture practice, and we established it following our involvement in the realisation of nearly 800 homes across 24 sites for Croydon Council, acting as client-side design advisor, but also an in-house architecture team. We're now looking at wider kind of remit, I guess, across the estates that we're working on across the country, which is a more holistic approach that includes retrofit and infill on these estates. I'm here with Beth Day.
Hello, hi, I'm Beth. I've been working with Chloe on the project that we're just about to run through, and I've also had some additional training on retrofit through the AECB, so that's the Association of Environment Conscious Builders, and I think it's worth having a look at the courses that they offer, just to get that additional sort of knowledge and skills. I think specifically the one that I did was called the Carbon Light Retrofit Foundation course, and it's really given me that extra layer of technical understanding and know-how with understanding the sort of building science and how we're applying the retrofit measures that we're doing. So yeah, that's a really worthwhile one to look at.
Yeah, I think the scale of the upskilling isn't just about construction. I think even as architects, consultants, engineers, I mean, I think everybody needs to be upskilling at the moment. It's kind of a whole new skill set, really. I think Brian's probably done a lot about setting the scene, but I think the one thing that sticks in my mind is this figure of 8 homes per minute that we need to be retrofitting to get anywhere close to achieving the net zero carbon target by 2050 of homes reaching EPC A. There's obviously the 2 targets that we kind of end up talking to our clients a lot about, reaching EPC C by 2030 and then EPC A by 2050. But for us, it's more than just kind of these targets. It's about, a lot of these estates that we're working on are really underinvested in. And it's not just about the carbon upgrades. It's also about kind of health and well-being, access to external space, and all of that, and kind of creating more of a sense of pride in places where people live. So we're going to talk to you very briefly about this project that we're working on up in Lancaster. It's obviously quite a long way away from Waltham Forest, but I think the challenges are very, very similar. So this is a 250 home estate right by the banks of the River Lune. It looks idyllic from kind of an aerial vantage point, but it's been chronically underinvested in over the last kind of 30 or 40 years. It was built in 1957, and we've been doing, this is part of our kind of piece of visioning work that we've been doing, which is looking at infill across the estate as well as wholesale upgrades to the external fabric. So the estate is these 3 towers and then a series of lower rise 3 and 4 story blocks. And then there's a former high school here off to one side that we're just about to submit our first planning application on for some new build homes. But this is the area we're going to talk to you about, which is Lune and Derby houses. These are just some images on the ground. There was some investment work done in the 90s to kind of overclad it with an EWI system, which is now failing. the homes are quite system built. So they're quite tight in terms of floor to ceiling, very mean in terms of window proportions. They don't have their own external amenity space. I think probably everybody's relatively familiar with it, these sorts of homes. The thing that's particularly unique and challenging about this one is it was built using wimpy no fines construction, which literally is what it says on the tin in terms of there's no fines in the concrete, so there's no sand in it. So it's literally like working with a crunchy bar. It's not quite as bad as rack, but it's, in terms of fixing in and upgrading it, it's particularly challenging. And then I'll hand over to Beth to kind of introduce.
Yeah. So we've got a before and after image here just to see what we're sort of working with. And as Chloe mentioned, these existing 1960s buildings are in a really poor state of repair, as you can see, with damp and mold problems and generally just really neglected. So the existing homes are stacked maisonettes. They are below space standards, and there's almost nothing in the way of resident amenities. You can see the buildings are just sort of plonked in a swathe of grass, which isn't very well used. So we really wanted to look at the retrofit proposals with a holistic approach, not just improving the building performance in terms of the carbon savings, but also looking at improving the look and feel of the buildings and also the landscaping, which we saw as an opportunity to improve residents' well-being and the enjoyment of their homes, who were going to move back into these homes once retrofitted. So we set out to rectify the 1960s urban mistakes, creating new fronts and backs, new front doors from the street, larger windows, and creating a new communal courtyard with balconies and gardens as well for the residents. We refurbished the ground floor and first floor maisonettes and kept those in situ. And then on the upper floors, we turned these into single story apartments so that they were then space standard compliant and felt much more generous. If we go on to the next slide. This is a diagram sort of showing our original approach. It has moved on a fair amount, but it gives an idea of what our approach was to fabric first and sort of the build up. So in terms of the building performance, we were originally targeting net zero carbon in use, which we were unable to achieve due to the lack of roof space for generating on-site renewable energy. So our target evolved to EPC A. We employed a fabric first approach, which we proposed to wrap the building in 250 mil of 250 mil of rock wool, targeting a U value of 0.15, which is pretty much passive house standards, with a new brick slips cladding system and then triple glazed windows as well. And then in terms of building services, we were proposing to install MVHRs and air source heat pumps, as well as many PVs as possible on the roof. We did look at an option which you can see drawn here, which added another story, but unfortunately this wasn't viable. It considerably increased the costs. So with the addition of a lift and also an exoskeleton and structure, so this option was discounted as not being viable to continue with.
And there was also some complexities with planning as well in terms of adding additional units to the scheme, which I know we shouldn't be held back by things like that, but it did just make it a little bit more complicated.
Yeah. On to the next slide. This just gives it a bit of an overview of what our landscaping proposals were, which I've touched on earlier. So you can see our main intervention was really this communal courtyard between the two blocks, which created this area where residents were asking for places to let their kids out to run around and play safely. So you've got two quite busy roads on the boundary of the site, and that was something that we really wanted to introduce for sort of greater social cohesion. And then you can also see the addition of new front doors, opening up the ground floors to be open plan, with then spilling out onto these new gardens and terraces. I want to go on to the next slide. And looking at the floor plans in a bit more detail, can't see the existing here, but it just shows that we really were, well, the existing floor plans were very constrained. The rooms felt very tight and small when you were inside them. So by opening up that entry level and making it as open plan as possible, we really wanted to create a much more generous feeling of space and light with the larger windows. On to the next one. And then this slide just gives a bit of an overview of what we sort of set out with, and then what we've upgraded in the building. So we've started off with buildings that were EPC D or E, and looking to upgrade those to EPC A, and then introducing renewable energy on site, so PVs and air source heat pumps, creating all the new homes to be space standard compliant, which was really important, an important part of the brief. Going from homes that have no access to outdoor space to all the homes having private gardens and balconies, and then the addition of this new communal courtyard, reducing the running costs, which is really critical, from £1,500 a month to £600 a month. Oh, sorry, a year. Not a month. a year to £600 a year. And then really importantly, reducing that maintenance cost as well by a third. And I think one thing to mention about this project is that we really struggled, as you can imagine, with the costs, and through these retrofit measures and meeting EPC-A, the build cost was actually equivalent to a new build. So we went through various rounds of value engineering to really try and reduce down that cost. And I think what we've started to look at is this sort of phased approach of how you look at doing retrofit measures over a period of time, which really breaks down the sort of budget over a longer period. And
it's also making sure that you're not doing, I think the key thing for us was going on a journey with Lancaster City Council as the client, who were really piloting this piece of work. But they obviously started off with that very high ambition for what they wanted these projects to achieve. But it's, rather than downgrading everything through a VE process so it might kind of reach EPC-C, is making sure that if you're investing in the fabric, you're doing that and everything adds up to a bigger picture in the future. So it might be that we do more in terms of fabric, and then we'll add on more in light of, in terms of PVs and things to the roof and upgrading of windows.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Beth, and thank you so much, Chloe. I'll be moving on to our next speaker, who is Ciara Hanson. So I'm sharing Ciara's slide, so bear with me one moment. Hopefully it's much smoother this time around.
Thanks, Ajay. I can start anyway with a brief introduction. So my role I'm Ciara Hanson. I work in London Borough of Waltham Forest, in the council itself, and I'm the climate programme manager. We have a particular role in the council. It's quite important to convene lots of different teams, and I think it's really useful to see some of the presentations there from Chloe and Beth to illustrate some of the complex problems that we tackle as a council and as other organisations like housing associations and building owners generally. Damp and mould and maintenance, and even expanding to kind of wider issues that are all interconnected about providing good quality green space for well-being, and providing enough homes. So my role in the team is, a lot of it is delivering projects, but it's also about convening across organisations and across our organisation to bring together the right people to solve some of these complex issues. yeah, so I think cost of living and affordability has become like a serious consideration with everything we do. So how do we encourage private owners to improve energy efficiency of homes? We have limited control over other owners of buildings, but we do have some interactions that we can use them to make positive steps forward. So yeah, just before I dive into my shortfall slides, I saw there was someone in this call that's a landlord, private landlord. If you're renting out property for domestic purposes, we'd be really interested to speak to you, because at the moment we're looking at what we can do to encourage landlords and help them with their retrofitting, amongst other projects. So thanks so much for showing slides there, Ajay. On to the second one, and I'll show some statistics there. So what is the problem? What's the problem that we're tackling? This kind of overall climate action. Why? Where are the emissions coming from? So these are the emissions that are produced within the borough. So you can see straight away that housing and transport are really significant. This is typical of any urban local authority, such as ours, and any London borough has a similar kind of breakdown. Now, housing is nearly half of our borough's emissions, produces nearly half. And so this not only means that there's a lot of gas boilers heating homes, but many homes are not energy efficient, they're expensive and they're inefficient to run and heat. And as a borough, we've got around 100,000 homes, and we have some distinct challenges. So Waltham Forest has got a building age issue. So we've got some of the oldest housing stock in London. That, yeah, as you see from Chloe's and Beth's presentation, there's specific issues that we tackle within certain building types, and we have some specific ones that we are tackling. And then another key issue, which is related to private renters and the cost for private renters to run their home. Typically, that's the group of people that spend the highest proportion of their income on housing costs, and that is rising currently. We know the number of people that are privately renting in the borough has grown in the last 10 years. So that's an increasing problem that we're looking to tackle. So what are we doing? The Council's Climate Action Plan emphasises some of these core issues and sets out some projects to tackle building emissions as one of those key pillars. So onto the next slide, gives you a quick summary of the areas that we're focusing on to deliver climate action from the point of view of a council, our own emissions, and also from the point of view as encouraging everyone within the borough to take collective climate action. So these images here, they're setting out the themes from the climate action plan that we have in place, and it's there so that we can set out steps to significantly reduce our emissions. The projects are diverse and plentiful, so it's not just any one theme, it's on all of the themes. What can we do, what can we enable others to do in all of these areas? And it's also about leading by example. So as an organisation that can take steps to be at the forefront of climate action, we look to implement everything we can, particularly which we can then share lessons and relay how other organisations could do something similar. We like to, where we can, be as open as possible. Not everything goes right first time, but sharing those lessons learned and what not to do, what might work better in the future, is also really important. So just a quick run through of these themes. So energy efficient buildings on the very top there. Obviously, as I said, that's really key, particularly to our borough. Place for people and not cars. This is about sustainable transport. What more can we do for sustainable transport? With various projects there that involve installing new electric vehicle infrastructure, enable suppliers to come into the borough to do that, more cycling infrastructure. And then onto the next thing there is about consuming less and recycling more. So this is about circular economy principles. So encouraging people to share, reuse and reduce their waste. And then the fourth one there being about a greener, more resilient borough. And all of these themes, they're not just centred around emissions. We look at all of the benefits we can deliver through projects. And that definitely includes reducing the effects of extreme weather events in the borough where we can, particularly flooding, effects of overheating. All of these issues do affect our residents and our businesses, and it's those are key objectives that are built into projects. So just to highlight a couple of the targets, particularly relating to homes in the borough, in the climate action plan, we do have a target for 80% of our homes in Waltham Forest to achieve high level of energy efficiency, so that's EPC level B or higher by 2030. So we're working towards that target now, and we're particularly focused on tackling fuel poverty. So this is a particular definition, and it relates to people that fall into the category of living in a poorly energy efficient home, and also having a proportionally low amount of income left after they have heated their home and spent the money that they need to run their home. So there's a certain number of group of people that we're looking to include in projects and enable projects to be able to retrofit their homes directly. And we're setting targets this year to aim to tackle around 1,000 homes and bring them out of fuel poverty. Now, that's not just through looking at the income side of things. That is very important, definitely looking at skills, improving skills and opportunities for people to get into more stable and high paid employment. But we know that the most effective and swiftest way to tackle fuel poverty category is directly by improving the physical energy efficiency of homes. So it is retrofitting. Retrofitting is an answer to that complex problem, alongside other solutions, and working with residents in ways for skills and employment. So yeah, to summarise that, at the moment we're doing a lot. The progress to date is not enough, so we need to do more, and we need to do more at speed and at scale. So onto the last slide there, Ajay. This just summarises some of the, I wanted to end on some positives, some of the achievements that that we've enabled over the last year or so, and this is working really closely with residents and visitors, people across the borough. So these are key achievements, and these are actually some key achievements that we've been presenting to the council. So look, these projects have gone really well. There's some lessons that we can take from these projects, but these are particularly interesting because these all highlight there's skills, green skills, sustainable building professionals that are needed in all of these projects. So to run through them really quickly, one of them is the low bills warmer homes. So this was about improving energy efficiency of residents' homes, particularly those residents who need that help most and might be struggling to pay energy bills more than others. So we have helped more than 3,000 homes now. But there's a large amount of carbon savings to that. So that improves people's situations because they're spending much less money on their, or hopefully a bit less money on their bills, but also reducing carbon emissions across the borough. And then the middle there, that's about flood mitigation devices, which we've been installing in homes for free for residents, and that's using funding we found through the North London Waste Authority. So this means that we've been able to install some specially adapted water butts in people's gardens as well, which actually collect storm water during high periods of kind of heavy rainfall. That is particularly activating community resilience and also tackling what we know has been an issue in the past of some serious flooding in particular high risk areas in the borough. And these all touch on using a in-house contractor we have called Service Store. So on the top there, we've mentioned there that we've launched our own retrofit company. This is the Service Store, Waltham Forest Service Store, and they are building their skills, building capacity to expand that service and become experts in the field of retrofitting all building types. Now there's real challenges there, and it is about capacity building at the moment. Service Store is gaining contracts and bigger contracts, but the main thing that's holding them back is being able to find the right people to train and upskill and retaining those staff as well. So that is a real opportunity for people and a real one that we see in projects. So I think that probably summarises for me that it's really about, you know, people, bringing people in with the skills, and you are the solution, and bringing the solution to some of these projects. There are opportunities out there, and we see that on the ground every day. So thank you very much, and I'd be really interested to hear from anyone if you wanted to get in touch, speak to me about any of these projects, or if you're a private landlord, do email me. I'll put my email in the chat. Thanks, Ajay.
Thanks, Ciara. Could you tell us more about the upgrade loan?
Sure. Yeah, I didn't mention that one in detail. So that's a project which is just coming to the application period's come to a close now. That was available for private residents and landlords in the borough to apply for a 0% interest loan to improve the energy efficiency of their homes. So, for example, installing solar panels and insulation in homes, anything that was going to improve the energy efficiency. So that was oversubscribed. So that was really successful. The pot of money was for £250,000. So that has now been expended, and will be repaid over a period of maximum 10 years, 10-year periods for the people that have been awarded that loan. So because it was oversubscribed, we're really interested in that in particular. What else can we do in that area? Should we look to launch another round? And particularly, should we look to launch a round specifically for landlords to apply? How can we incentivise landlords to do the same? Because although that was open to landlords, no landlords I'm aware of has been awarded or actually applied for that funding. So yeah, we're really interested in that market in particular.
Great, thank you so much. There's a couple of questions for you, Ciara, in the chat, but I'll leave that for you to respond to, just for the interest of time. But yeah, thank you to all our speakers for sharing some really informative and insightful topics and case studies. So as I mentioned in the group chat, there is a little quiz I've got prepared. So it's on Mentimeter. I'll share the link. I'll also just share my slides, which has all the instructions to join. It's very, very short. It's hopefully a bit of fun. So yes, here it is. So if you could just, if you want to log on, if you're on your desktop, to mentimeter.com, and that's the code you'll see on top that you can put in, and then yeah, I can start presenting. So hopefully this would. Great, all right. We've got some people already voting in the chat, so I'll just share my screen so people can see what the questions are. So hopefully everyone can join the Mentimeter. I'll leave that off for a couple of moments. Great. So the first question is, how many jobs will be needed by 2025 just to insulate homes and install heat pumps and district heating? And your options are 29,000, 37,000, and 56,000. So it looks like a majority vote of 29,000. Give a couple more people an opportunity. Oh, 56,000. It's take also in the second run in. So it's neck and neck with 29,000 and 56,000. I feel like I'm commentary like the cricket or the races at this point. But yeah, let's see what the real answer is. Oh, going on to the next one. How many trained heat pump engineers are there in the UK? So the options are 27,000, wow, already 3,000, or 4,250. Got 2,700 in the lead, 3,000 neck and neck. $27,000, 2,700 in the lead. Cool. So the correct answer here is actually 3,000. So we actually needed an additional 2,700 heat pump engineers trained in the UK to do the job. Moving on to the next question. How much do heat pump engineers earn? Is it 32,000 per year, 38,000 per year, or 41,000 per year? A quick shot up of 41,000. Wow, 6 people have said 41,000 per year. Great. So the actual answer is 38,000 per year. I think it'll be nice if it was 41,000, but I think we could definitely reach that at some point. But currently it is 38,000 per year for heat pump engineers and what they earn. On to the next question. What percentage of homes that are lived in today will still be inhabited in 2050? What percentage of homes that are lived in today will still be inhabited in 2050? The majority are saying 80%. We've got 20%. So yeah, if you have selected 80%, you are correct. That 80% of homes that are lived in today will still be inhabited in 2050. And that's the end of the quiz. Hopefully that was insightful. Yeah. So moving on to our next part of the webinar, I'm going to hand it over to Anthony, who has joined us. Hi, Anthony, you there?
Morning, Ajay. How are you?
Morning. All good, thank you. So Anthony has kindly offered, or I've kind of asked, or kind of volunteered him to be host for our next part of the segment, which is our panel talk. And Anthony is from CITB, and I'll let Anthony kind of talk about or introduce themselves, and then I'll let you hand it over to you, Anthony, for the Q&A webinar panel talk part of it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ajay. Yeah, so as Ajay said, my name's Anthony. I'm an engagement manager for CITB. We are the industry training board for construction. 3 key priority aims for us is really attract talent, train talent, retain talent within the construction industry. So there's a bit, obviously, green skills is huge, very high up on our agenda. It's great to be able to take part in this. So I'm going to kick off first. First question is probably aimed towards Beth and Chloe. So what sort of common mistakes clients make when they're designing green homes or green buildings?
I think it's probably, what's the common mistake? I think it's just getting the brief right and the energy strategy. It seems to be particularly kind of longer term maintenance. I think there's a big ambition, particularly with bigger estate owners, to do more of the district heating side of things. And it just becomes quite difficult if they're wanting to progress projects very quickly and they still haven't really dealt with how they're going to be managing the long-term energy supply of their estates. That bit can become quite difficult. And I think it's It's that what can they actually afford to do now? And for, you know, we've been talking about the scale of the problem that we face as well. You know, we don't have enough people or enough money to upgrade all of the buildings that we've got in this country. And it's kind of just being realistic about what you can do now and making sure that you've got a longer term strategy, that the sum of parts adds up to something that is meaningful in the longer term. And we're not taking it apart in 10 years' time.
Yeah, that's because it was really interesting going through the presentation that you and Beth did. There was a sort of, I'd be very interested if you could sort of tell the attendees about, so there was a 33% reduction in maintenance costs. So what sort of things did has the project been able to do that? How has it managed to achieve that?
I think it's just about the upgrade of the fabric and the M&E that's gone into it. I mean, we're still at a technical design stage. It hasn't actually been delivered yet. So in terms of being able to go and assess exactly kind of what are the key successes, we're not there yet. And I mean, part of it as well is also looking at the external external landscaping as well, which requires quite a lot of lawn mowing at the moment, but actually giving that over to the residents who live there, and giving them private spaces and the communal space to look after, as well as also reducing the estate load.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because everybody sort of, there's this misunderstanding about green and efficiency and things like that. You know, you probably take a Menti poll of the group, how many of them would have thought lawn mowers would have been focused into that maintenance cost. So it's really interesting to see how that design goes right down to that granular level. That's really interesting. I suppose next question is probably really useful for Brian. So obviously we've got the trust mark past 2035. What's the difference between that, and what are the sort of queries you've been having from FMB members about which accreditation to go for, or both, and just sort of give a little bit of background into that, if you could?
Yeah, sure. So we know that for social housing, people are using the PAS 2035, which is absolutely fine. That's agreed. Most of my members don't get involved in those supply chains. My members are primarily in the owner-occupied sector. And so for that sector, homeowners don't have to have someone who's doing PAS 2035. They can rely on the Trustmark License Plus, or not at all. It is a bit of a free-for-all. So during the pandemic, the government introduced the Green Homes Grant Scheme as a means to try to upskill builders. So they introduced the grant, and then it was taken away. And that really, I think, dented confidence amongst small builders wanting to invest, because they thought, actually, okay, the government's trying to create demand here, encouraging homeowners to retrofit. Then they take the money away. And the only incentive for homeowners at the moment is to remove their gas boiler and put in a heat pump. There's no incentive to actually retrofit and improve the fabric. So we've tested this with the survey. We know that actually our members have said they're willing to do the work, but there's very poor consumer demand. And that's not so surprising in the owner-occupied sector. People are struggling in terms of paying their mortgages. There's very less money available to invest in improving the home. And interestingly, people are still preferring to have a home extension rather than, or a new kitchen, new bathroom, rather than focusing on energy efficiency improvements, despite the fact that energy bills have gone up. So it is a bit of a chicken and egg. The builders are saying we want the demand from consumers. Consumers, for various reasons, are not asking for retrofit. Now, I do see that changing over time. I think when we get to a point when the capital value of property changes, depending on the EPC rating, we're more likely to see that will be the big shift, the snowball effect, when people think, okay, by investing in my home to make it more energy efficient, I will get a better return when I sell the property. But this is taking too long. And the one thing, my members are calling for is certainty. The flip-flopping of policy. The Green Deal came, the Green Deal went. The Green Homes Grant Scheme came and it went. The government talked about its heat and building strategy, but didn't really, apart from gas boilers, there's nothing there for homeowners. the Labour Party spoke about £28 billion that it was going to spend, and that's been cut back, and they're talking about 5 million homes to be retrofitted rather than 19 million homes. So it is part of a wider policy landscape that policy makers, politicians have done the big talk, but actually when it comes to putting policies in place to support this, I would argue it's lacking.
So and I suppose going back to your presentation, Brian, I think it's watch this space on the manifestos in the coming months then to see who's paid attention to some of those conversations you had, probably fair to say.
And I think, the Labour Party has said they want to retrofit 5 million homes. Fantastic. But we need the details and who's actually going to do that work, because we do need to upskill builders to be able to do that work. It's still quite a big project. It's still a big project for the next Parliament.
Well, that's really interesting. We talk about, obviously, we've both got sort of interest in this in terms of some of the work that we've been doing. But I mean, to give some context to the attendees of this, we're already struggling with industry accreditation. So making sure that anybody who hasn't got a competence-related qualification must have one by December this year. So we haven't even got defined competence in place for the skills we're currently using. So a big challenge ahead then to get the skills for the improvement and making houses more energy efficient, and that sort of goal towards net zero, I think it'd be fair to say, wouldn't it, Brian?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I do feel retrofit should be treated like an infrastructure project, given the scale of the challenge. It should be a 20-year plan. The trouble is, we're thinking short-term cycles of 5 years, and actually this is much bigger, and we need a cross-party consensus on this, because housing, such a shame that housing is not one of the top 5 issues politicians are talking about.
Yeah, I think that we could continue this discussion for hours on end, Brian, and then go off on any tangent. But being a good corporate citizen, I'm going to decline to do that. So, coming over to Ciara, really interested. So, I suppose I've seen something pop up in the chat. It'd be really interesting. So, what was the thinking behind the accredited retrofit company? Give us a little bit more detail into that, because it seems really interesting.
Do I have any secret data?
Yeah, sure. So what's really unusual actually is for a council to have an in-house contractor. That's what we often call them. So Waltham Forest Services, I put a link in the chat there. I can put a further one if there's any follow-up questions. They are owned solely by the council. So they take their objectives and they build their business plan based on council priorities. And they're available for residents in the borough to contract to do works. So, they do landscaping, they'll do works to homes, they do a wide range of building services. And that's offered on a commercial basis at a competitive price. So it is a useful, very useful kind of tool to have, if I dare call them a tool. They're much more than that. It does mean that they can be seen, hopefully, by people as a trusted contractor, and that's a really good start initially to tackle some of the challenges that we see with retrofit today. They're very useful to be able to sort of have as a kind of independent, in a way, independent from the council's internal workings, to actually go out and talk to people and understand what is needed in different homes and buildings in the borough. So at the moment they're focusing particularly on domestic retrofit, upskilling and gaining accreditations, and they have actually gained quite significant value contracts through that. The challenges they are facing is simply capacity building of staff. That is the thing that's holding them back at the moment. There's further work out there that they can bid for and they're capable of delivering against, and they also have a good network of subcontractors, but it is that in-house capacity building which is the current area that we're looking to help unlock with them.
And if you had a crystal ball or the Elder Wand, cheap Harry Potter reference there, never mind, I'm a big kid, but never mind, we'll carry on with that. What would be one or two things that if you'd be able to sort of use that Elder Wand and get to develop that internal capacity of staff, what would one or two things be that would probably help you be able to deliver on that and sort of really get it to kick on?
I think one of the key things is having a bit of a more connected, closer relationship with training providers, understanding who is actually being trained, individuals that are being trained, and particularly local individuals we're particularly interested in, and being able to have conversations with them directly. So there are activities that Ajay and Kate that are managing, which is directly doing that at the moment, and working with the Sustainable Construction School in the borough as well, to ensure that the courses actually meet the needs of what commercially we're seeing is a need in the borough. So I suppose those are two areas that we're looking to support as the climate team in particular.
Well, some good news, Ciara. I just saw in the chat a familiar face, Mr. Shanley, from Darren Shanley's just popped a message in the chat. So already you've got a training provider that's willing and ready to come to
great.
That's good. At least we've
Excellent.
put something together there. So I suppose the next question would be, I'll throw it open to all of the panel. So young people that, that there is this new generation that are really concerned about the climate and how it's going to affect things. And, it's really interesting even seeing now I sit as a parent governor at my child's primary school, and the birth rates currently in Hertfordshire are the lowest for 20 odd years. And one of the reasons cited is because perhaps people are a bit reticent to bring new people into the world because of the climate they're coming into. But also as well, there's this sort of thing is there's lots of opportunities in the green sector, but there's this perception out there that the pay and conditions aren't great when actually there's potentially really good earnings potential. So what do we think collectively, and I'd probably include my own employer, CITB, in this, what do we need to do as an industry to sort of A, dispel those myths, and B, really broaden out and attract young people and particularly a diverse workforce? Because at the moment we've got far too, women make up 50% of the population, yet they're only about 20 odd % of construction workers, which doesn't really make sense. So how can we help attract these people into this new green space, and what do you think we could all do collectively to help with that?
Can I start, Andy? Because you've identified a sort of ongoing problem in our sector, that it's still very white, male dominated, and we need to actually bring people in from different backgrounds, particularly women. On the tools, it's particularly bad. About 2% of women on the tools. So we do have an image problem, and we need to actually address that if we're going to have enough people to actually do the work. So I think the industry needs to shape up. That's why I think our call for licensing of construction companies would certainly help professionalize the industry and raise standards. I think the way people are recruited in the industry tends to be very traditional. It's people that are known to employers. And I think we need to get away from the mud and boots image that maybe exists within schools and colleges, that actually construction is not just about mud and boots. It offers all sorts of opportunities. And Retrofit, I think, is very exciting because it does actually offer a lot of new opportunities. The Retrofit coordinator, people who will need stronger communication skills. And obviously construction is not just learn a trade and stop. My members have learned a trade and set up their own business and have become very successful running an SME company, which can be, in terms financially quite lucrative. But it means that's one area if we want to support those who want to be entrepreneurial. But you could become a surveyor, you can become a project manager, you could become an architect. So many opportunities. I think we're not good as a sector demonstrating those opportunities to young people, and we need to move away from the over-reliance on a university education and put vocational training on an equal playing field, so that actually people value apprenticeships and also make it easier for them to find an apprenticeship, and for society to recognise that we need people who are skilled in these particular areas. It's not just about having a degree, which very often doesn't lead to a fulfilling job when people graduate.
Exactly, and that's, I think, the point you underscore about the licensing as well, isn't it? In Germany, you have to be a member of a guild and to be a tradesperson, whereas in Britain, not.
Well, we can all go out this afternoon. Some might be better qualified than others.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm assuming the data.
I could add to that if helpful. Talking as a woman that trained in construction industry and now work in a slightly broader role, yeah, there's definitely things that can be done, and I see kind of working within retrofitting as a very creative job. It's not what you typically think as creativity, but I am inspired by the complexity, and that it's very challenging, and looking at complex problems and solving them is a creative skill. So I think demonstrating what is green jobs, I think they're good jobs, and that's the key thing. And maybe it is kind of the branding, the marketing of it that is on the face of it very important. And then one other point, what we're doing as a council is through another initiative that I've not mentioned, is that we have a educational facility which actually educates a whole range of ages, but it focuses particularly on school students to inspire them with environmental education. And this is particularly looking at creating the leaders of the future. So actually working with younger ages, and I'm not sure about academia, but in primary and kind of secondary school, what can we do to actually share more information, inspire people to be familiar with these types of jobs and areas of work much earlier on, so we are actually inspiring the future workforce.
Excellent, that's really good. Thanks, Ciara. I'll be really interested to hear about that, so I'll drop you an email and I'll get some details on that. So very interested to look at that. I suppose as well, just to sort of go back to Beth and Chloe as well, about, I mean, it's really pleasing to see you in the design phase. I mean, how did you actually find your way into architecture and design, and what sort of advice and tips would you get for people who want to get into that industry, that part of the industry?
I went into architecture in spite of my dad telling me I shouldn't. But he was more worried about he was trained as an engineer and was aware of kind of the issues in the 90s and kind of architects being out of work and being taxi drivers and all of that sort of stuff. So he was very against me going into a career. So I guess I've got teenage rebellion on my hands, like in terms of what's driven me. But I think, you know, part of that was, I will do this regardless. And lots of people were saying, you know, how will you cope on site? You're a female, you know, you can't tell from Zoom, but I'm only 5'2". So, you know, talking to kind of builders on site, how's that all going to work out for you? And, you know, all of that sort of stuff. So I think, I mean, I've been in the industry for about a bit over 20 years now, and I think it has dramatically changed from what it was 20 years ago, but it's still got a long way to go, particularly as you're saying on site. And I think it's, yeah, I mean, I think architecture has got its own challenges in terms of kind of barriers to entry now, in terms of costs that it, you know, the amount of fees it costs to get into architecture school, and there's a lot of reform going on around that. But I mean, I think if I was 18 again, I don't know if I would pick architecture knowing it's going to cost as much as it does. So I think there's a real opportunity for the construction industry to kind of really kind of show alternative ways into this industry for a wider group of people. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, but it is interesting, isn't it? Because there's clearly sort of a lot of talent out there, but perhaps, again, I look at it myself as that, you know, I've been able to have my experiences in my world because of when I was born, not necessarily just because of the hard work and dedication. But I suppose as well, somebody like yourself, Chloe, is a real positive advocate to show that the careers and the possibilities are there. To be able to spread your message, what perhaps could industry do to support you around that, to sort of become a sort of a real ambassadorial sort of figure, to sort of show yourself as that real positive role model to encourage more females and people who perhaps have the desire to get into the industry? Is there anything else industry could do to support you with that, to sort of spread the word of your success and how industry has changed dramatically over the past 10, 15 years?
Yeah, well, I think it's opportunities like this to talk and share and kind of have a bit of a conversation about the wider industry. I think all kind of sectors of the construction industry have got a lot to do in terms of supporting women in particular, both in terms of kind of having families, but also through things like the menopause. And I think, you know, I would say, our workplaces need to get much better at that, at acknowledging that those are real issues, and how do you support people through a lifelong career. And so I think, again, that's about talking, but also about flexibility of work. And I think particularly within the consultancy part of the construction industry, I think that is getting better. But I can imagine that that's incredibly tough if you're actually a tradesperson on site and you're facing issues of needing to work flexibly, or with a bit more kind of mental support around what it is that you do.
Brilliant. That's really great. Some really good points there. So the final sort of overall question to all panel members. So somebody's on the call perhaps today who's heard about these issues for the first time. What do you think? What would your bit of advice be for them to get out? How would they get to find out a little bit more, to dip their toes in the water and find out about a career, or if they're really keen to get involved? What might be a tip each of the panel members might give somebody on the call for that? So I'll go with you, Chloe, because you're on screen first. Sorry.
Where do you go to start off with? I mean, I think reach out to anybody. I think one thing that's kind of come across has changed is kind of accessibility to people. Reach out to anybody that you come across and ask them for help and insight. Most people kind of stop and have a coffee if you drop them a line and just say, give me some pointers. LinkedIn is a huge kind of online forum I think now for the world of work and industry. And there's a lot of organizations out there that are supporting kind of people into the construction industry, like Future of London is one that springs to mind. Who they've started to run a bit of an apprentice scheme.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chloe. Ciara?
Yeah, and I think this is one of the problems, isn't it? There are all of these courses available, and actually there isn't very easy. I don't think there's a central database you can search for courses, which then links you to providers. So that is a challenge. I would personally tackle it by looking first at a local provider, one that I can physically get to, and seeing what courses they provide. So kind of starting in both directions, search what's available nationally and then look for a local provider. And I have provided a link to, this won't provide all the answers to your question, but a link to the council newsletters subscription. So you can subscribe to the climate newsletter, when there's further projects and areas that you can get involved in. That's the key place that we post things in, so people can actually interact with the council and some of the projects that we're delivering in future.
Brilliant. And perhaps Brian, a tip for anybody wanting to get a career in construction. Anything from your end to add to that?
Well, just to add, I think construction is changing. I think the traditional images will change over time. We've got the Building Safety Act, we've got the Green Agenda. So I think for a young person coming in, it's being part of that change. And I think that's exciting for people who actually want to make the world a better place. Construction plays its part, and there's a lot of work to be done. So for people who are looking to make a difference, construction is the place to be, because it will create a better world.
Brilliant. That's excellent, Brian. So that concludes the panel. I'm gonna look at the chat for some Q&A. Any other questions that can sort of go to the panel or any of us? I can see the energy update loan. Ciara's already answered that in the chat. Interesting point in terms of Paul Burns. So government skills boot camps there as well. So really good point there that skills boot camps aren't just a route to get new entrants for employers, but also as well it's that opportunity for people to be upskilled. So again, if depending on company size, they'll either have 70% of the course cost covered, or 90% depending on the size there.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat, Anthony. One question was, are there any incentives / support for older people interested in changing careers to the retrofit sector?
So generally speaking, within CITB, around about 99% of our funding will always follow the employer. So there are grants for our CITB registered employers to pay for training. We do have two sites, so it's Talent View Construction and Construction Talent Retention Scheme, which employers can access there. So it'd be really interesting to sort of get your details on Talent View Construction, because that's where employers can go to look at that. We do have sort of on-site experience hubs as well, so where there's routes into employment there. So again, you're looking at probably the closest one will be the Canada Water site down by the old print presses there. So there are on-site experience hubs where training's provided, and then there's the opportunity to get linked with employers and get a route in there as well. So again, but I can share some of that, and then we can get that sent out to attendees, Ajay, if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists? Feel free to mute yourself at this point. We've got a couple more minutes before we wrap up, or feel free to put them in the chat. Hello, Rain.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, good, thank you.
I just want to say it would have been really helpful if we were able to be a bit more interactive on this, because it's been great to hear so many points that have come across, but no real opportunity to kind of interject and add some value to that. So there were lots of points made really early on through everybody. But if I start just here from where I am, I recognise what people are saying. I mean, the work that's going on in Waltham Forest is fantastic, and I definitely want to follow up on some of that. In terms of the skill set, in terms of the installers that are interested and willing to engage in this, I have to tell you that my experience is different. We have a massive growth of interested installers. I also worked on the Green Homes Grant project, where we were managing in excess of 1,700 installers. That was a project in its entirety that had highs and lows. But what I have found is that we have installers that were past 2030, 2017 that dropped off a cliff because of, as somebody mentioned earlier, the issue around you start something, you stop it, you get the interest, and it stops. They lost faith, they lost confidence, but some of them are coming back up now. Now, they may not have been re-registered for 2019, past 2030, 2019, but they are interested in past 2023, which is coming out soon. And again, in terms of standards, I mean, the new RICS residential retrofit standard, I wondered where, in terms of the original presentation, where that sat within the entire mix. In terms of the architects and the work that's going on inside the council at the moment, that's fantastic. We've got some great learning points on. I've worked on all of the energy efficiency and renewable government funded projects since 2007. So I'm aware of the trajectory and how these things are going. And I think that we're in a really, really positive place. But as somebody said, it's very disparate. You've got the CITB doing one bit. You've got the Retrofit Academy. You've got the IAA. You've got all sorts of schemes popping up all over the place. And I think the final point I would make is that in terms of career opportunities and including older people that are looking for a career break, it's a massively creative industry, and there are opportunities just within the retrofit sector itself in terms of project management, in terms of carrying out surveys, etc. So there was so much content there, and it was very, very interesting. But I think we can all learn from each other. So I think it's more about dialogue. In terms of women in the industry, I'm in a really good place in terms of we have a female-led retrofit team here. We are also part of women in construction setting as well. So if anybody wants any kind of have a conversation about that, then I'm more than happy to talk to them about that. There's a lot more that could have been said.
I'll definitely be taking you up on that offer, Lorraine. Really interested to see what you're doing. So
yeah, well, that's great. And actually, just to, my first incarnation with the CITB was from the age of 3. My father was the he actually helped develop some of the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 on scaffolding. So amazing. a lot of the trainees at the CITB have his book that he was writing when we were small children. So yeah, I'm very interested in the whole sector. Construction is a great area to be in.
Well,
That's a wonderful example, Lorraine, of being introduced to something at a young age and you're familiar with it
Yeah.
and become, you know, aspire to work within it. That's fascinating.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lorraine, for sharing. Would anyone like to share any thoughts or questions or comments? Just before we wrap up, we've got about 4 minutes.
I put my email in the chat, and I'm really interested in this group discussion because there's a lot of interaction, a lot of really interesting questions. So I'm really happy to have any conversations after this continue. Thanks so much for making your suggestions and putting some of your contacts there as well.
Great. Yeah, feel free to put any of your contact details in the chat if you'd like to share them. So I'll kind of start wrapping up at this point. I just want to say a massive thank you to all of our guest speakers for coming this morning and obviously sharing their presentations and being part of the conversation. Thank you to all of our guests who kind of joined and been very active within the chat and participating in my little quiz. Just to kind of wrap things up, just before I leave, just going to share my screen quickly. We've got some upcoming events here at Waltham Forest. We've got our Green Construction Jobs Fest, which is happening at the London Academy of Sustainable Construction on Wednesday, 15th of May. I believe that's next week or the week after, at 11 a.m. And so, yeah, it's been really great an event for anyone who wishes to explore career opportunities or gain insights from experts or network with like-minded individuals. You can scan that QR code, but I'll be kind of sending around an email after this webinar with all the details as well. So don't worry if you can't capture that right now. I'll be sure to kind of email everyone with more information. But yeah, just like I said, a massive thank you for everyone joining in this morning. It's been really, really informative. And yeah, thank you so much. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
bye.
Thanks, everyone.